What's up everybody, welcome back to Totally Exposed. We've decided to go out and about today. We are in Royal Leamington Spa.
That's right, and we're here to test two cameras to see which are the best for video.
Is it going to be the Panasonic GH5?
Or will it be the Canon 5D Mark IV?
Let's do this.
Do it. So as you saw there, we went out and got a few generic test shots with both the Canon 5D Mark IV and the Panasonic GH5, which are both great cameras in their own rights. Now when it comes to photography, there's only one clear winner in our minds.
Yeah, I agree. Well, I think I agree. You talking about the Canon?
I'm indeed talking about the Canon.
About the Canon. Maybe I'm a bit of a fanboy. I love Canon cameras. I love this 5D Mark IV. I think that the colours out of it are beautiful. Nice full frame sensor. The autofocus on it is amazing. You've got your dual pixel autofocus, which is just outstanding. I think for me, the Canon, for stills anyway, total no-brainer. Pick it, buy it.
So anyway, back on topic for this video, which is which of these cameras are best for recording video. I remember being super impressed with the specs for the GH5 when it was announced, and we jumped on board and ordered one as soon as it was released.
Yeah, it was a pretty good camera. I mean, let's just think, what did it have? For the money especially, you had 4K internal recording, 10-bit 4K internal recording at 25p and at 50p. Then you also had all your assistant tools, so you had focus peaking, you could load LUTs in, you could load preview LUTs in, you know, all this stuff. Quite a compelling option, I thought, for, especially, like I say, especially for the money, pretty good little video camera on paper. But
I literally about to say that.
But as it turned out, I mean, we won't give too much away just yet.
No spoilers.
What's on paper and what the camera's like in the real world are perhaps two very different things.
Well, we'll soon find out.
Now in that montage that you watched with camera 1 and camera 2, it's time to give the game away, I suppose. Camera 1 was the Canon 5D Mark IV, which I was using for the day, and the lens I had on it was this one here, which is the Canon 24-70 f2.8L.
Yep, and camera 2 was the Panasonic GH5, which I was using for the day, along with the Metabone Speed Booster and the Sigma 18-35.
Nice little setup. And what did you make of it then? How did you find it using it for the day?
One thing I would say about the GH5 was the image quality was amazing. However, the autofocus on the GH5 is where things start to fall down, I'm afraid. So when using on continuous mode, I found the autofocus to be quite slow at times, almost frustrating really.
Yeah, Yeah, it's a common complaint. Do you think that had anything to do with the fact that it was on a Metabones with a Sigma, like a third-party lens, or?
I don't think so. I mean, I've done some filming with this camera before using a native Lumix lens, and I had very similar problems then with the autofocus.
It does seem to be a bit of a theme, especially across the internet. A lot of people complaining about, as great as the image quality is, you get a really crisp, lovely, sharp 4K signal out of the camera, but the autofocus hampers it a little bit. There's, like I say, lots of people complaining, especially when it's in continuous mode.
Yes.
It's slow to pull focus, it loses track of things, it will buzz and hunt quite a lot, it's not very smooth. Now, there was a firmware update released. It was going to address a few things, it was going to add a new codec and whatnot, and apparently it was going to help with the autofocus problems, but to my mind...
No, I don't think it really made much of a difference.
I don't think it made any difference at all. And looking online at other people's reviews and their tests,
similar results, really.
I think, we're not alone.
So where I was having difficulty with the autofocus, how did you find the autofocus on the 5D Mark IV?
Well, the 5D, like I said, for the stills stuff, it's got the Canon's dual pixel autofocus. I think it's stellar. It's second to none. We'll get more into the focusing in a bit though. I want to talk about the sharpness, because you did mention that it had a super clean image, really nice. We've actually gone ahead and done a little side-by-side comparison here. So we've got the Panasonic GH5 on the left and the 5D Mark IV on the right. And in this test, we had the same lens. It was a Sigma 18-35, and we had the same aperture. We tried to keep all the camera settings were exactly the same, as near as we could to get a fairest test. And I mean, I would say from looking at this that the GH5 definitely does have the stronger looking image.
Oh, definitely, it's a lot sharper.
It is a lot sharper, especially when you zoom in. If you punch in here, you can see really, I mean, if you're pixel peeping like this, GH5 winner. But let's talk about the autofocus again.
Yeah, because it is such a big issue. I think it definitely needs addressing.
One of the features that both cameras have is face tracking.
Yeah.
We've got a little bit of a sample footage here. We've got Neil here on the camera, and we're tracking his face, and we're doing some tests to see how well the camera handles going from side to side and back to forward, and if he spins around, what that looks like, whether it loses focus, and if it does lose focus, how quickly it comes back again. And then we can also track him walking backwards and forwards, and it seems to be keeping up really well. It can spot your face pretty quickly. So looking at the GH5 in comparison here, we can see the same test with Neil kind of strafing side to side, walking backwards and forwards, spinning around, doing all these tests, trying to throw the camera off the scent as much as possible. And the GH5 supposedly has eye tracking. You can sort of see it there on the screen, that it can kind of figure out what's going on with the facial recognition side of things, but I think it's weak. I think it's not as good as the Canon.
No, I would agree.
Some people don't like the crop factor on the 5D Mark IV. They think it's unusable based on some other reviews that I've seen. I personally don't see it as being an issue.
I've not had an issue with it myself.
I mean, obviously you lose the width of the super wide angle lenses. You have to go really wide to get the shots in. But I think it's actually a bit of a bonus, if anything. There's other lenses like the Sigma 18-35, which is a crop sensor lens, which you can then use on this full frame camera and capture great video with it. In terms of colours, I found that the GH5 had a weird, when we got the footage back in post, it had a bit of a green
tinge to it.
Yeah, a bit of a green hue across everything. And I was noticing on a lot of things to do with like pieces of the camera myself, my beard and hair, my overall complexion was just had this weird green tint. You can dial a lot of this out in camera. You can shift the white balance, you can shift the saturation levels of different channels. I don't really want to be doing that.
No.
I would expect it to not have to do that for a camera that is dedicated for capturing video. I found that it made it quite hard, not hard to work with in post, but it was an additional colour correction step before you could get onto your kind of creative look.
The Canon, you didn't need to do one.
Exactly. I'd rather not have to do it. If there was an option of not having to do it, it's better to not have to do it.
Another thing that's worth considering is obviously lens selection. I mean, for Canon, the choice of lenses is vast compared to, say, the Panasonic.
Yeah, it's got a pretty good ecosystem of lenses. We've got a few dotted around here. The Lumix range, they've got a couple of really good lenses. You can also use some of the Olympus lenses. There's other Micro Four Third lenses that you could put on and still get some of the native features that you'd expect. But again, I think that if you were going to if you had to lean towards one or the other, the Canon wins on that regard. And especially if you're already a Canon shooter and you might have a collection of lenses already in your bag.
Exactly.
No brainer. Now you can obviously buy a Metabones adapter, which is what we had on our GH5, which allows you to put EF mount lenses on your Panasonic GH5, but they're not cheap. Ours was
about £600.
I think it was about £600. That would lead us nicely into price.
Yeah.
Because that is one thing that is quite different. How much was the GH5?
Well, the GH5 was around 1,700 quid when we picked ours up.
Yeah, and so the 5D Mark IV was about £1,000 more than that. So there is a considerable difference in price. They're not exactly apples for apples, are they?
No, but then if you, I suppose, if you take into consideration the variety of lenses, and if you did have to buy the Metabone speed booster, price is comparable.
Yeah, you're getting up there, and they are then comparable. And for the money, I think I'd rather have a more hybrid camera in the Canon.
Yes.
Than the GH5 seems very focused on video and less so on stills. It does take stills, obviously, and it's marketed as being a great stills camera as well. I don't really think people are buying it for its photo abilities, though, are they?
Definitely not.
One thing that the GH5 does going for it, though, however, is much more manageable file sizes.
Oh, yeah.
When we are shooting 4K, it's about 100 megabits a second files it generates. Now, as part of this firmware update, they were going to be doing 400 megabit per second files, although there was then a bit of a hoo-ha about whether anyone could make an SD card fast enough to write the data.
Yeah.
But you got a lot of, you could get a 128 gig SD card and it would last, a reasonable amount of time shooting 4K, and it was a good codec to work with. However,
when it comes to the Canon, unfortunately,
better buy some SD cards.
Yeah.
It shoots in motion JPEG format.
Right, okay.
The bit rate of which was, I think, about 500 megabits a second.
Yeah, it's around about 500 odd.
So it's about, each file size is going to be 5 times larger than it was with the GH5.
Yeah. Well, let's move things on to the next category which we tested, which is slow motion.
Yeah, and again, the GH5 wins. It's a more capable camera. It can do
easily,
4K, 60 frames per second or 50 frames per second for us here in the UK, which is great in camera. That's at 8-bit colour, but it can do 10-bit colour if it's fed out to an external recorder like the Ninja Inferno, which we've also had a bit of a play with. So you can get a real strong 50 frames per second, 4K, 10-bit signal, lovely stuff. It can then record all the way up to 120 frames per second in full HD as well.
That's impressive.
Yeah, which is great, and that's what I'd want out of a camera.
Yeah, it's even more impressive when you compare it to what the Canon can do, which can do 50 frames per second at 1080p and 120 frames per second at 720p.
So you can't do any 4K slow motion, even half-speed 4K slow motion, which is a bit of a limitation. If you were to step up a notch in the model line to the 1DX, that does 4K at 25p and 50p.
But what are they retailing for currently?
The 1DX is more than that again, quite a lot more. Add another grand or so on.
Yeah.
Another thing that's worth mentioning, and it was quite evident when we were editing the footage from that little montage, was the lack of stabilization in the Canon, both in the body and the lens that I was using didn't have IS. Now this lens here, which is 24-105, does have IS built in.
Yeah.
You were using the GH5, which has in-body stabilization. You can also, if you've got a supported lens, have lens, so you can end up with 5-way stabilization. Some of the footage that I've seen with people using it on a stabilized lens with the stabilized body, walking down the road, it looks like you're on a gimbal or something.
Really?
Yeah, it looks really strong. I had to add warp stabilizer on quite a lot of my clips from that montage from the Canon because it was a bit shaky.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have the steadiest of hands, but the footage which came out of the GH5, which I was shooting with, looked, head and shoulders above the Canon.
Yeah, it definitely did. So I think this leads us on nicely to a bit of a summary.
Yes.
And the clue is in the scene.
Yeah.
For we have the 5D Mark IV.
We do.
We do not have a GH5 any longer.
No, this is my Canon 80D.
Yeah, that's not a Panasonic GH5 for the eagle-eyed viewers amongst you.
It's also worth mentioning we're not filming this on the GH5 either.
No, we are filming on a Canon C200s, which we unboxed recently on the channel, and we're going to be doing a few more videos about that. But I think that says everything that needs to be said, really. In our minds, as great as the specs were on the Panasonic GH5, and they were great, and it is a great camera, especially for the money, we decided that we wanted to stick, if we had to pick one, which we did, we would stick with the Canon 5D Mark IV for most of the reasons that we outlined above previously. Great for photos, great for video.
Great autofocus, great range of lenses.
Great colour, bad file sizes, but I'm willing to live with that. So that's it. That's our little quick analysis at the Canon versus the GH5. The reasons why we just sold it.
Yes.
If that was helpful for you, give it a little like down below.
We'd like to hear your comments as well, so please post them below as well.
Yep, cool. And subscribe if you haven't already. And we'll catch you in the next one.
See you in the next one.